with the similar subject of ritual abuse. And we have with us today, the first time in Florida, she was with us in Denver last August, Brice Taylor of South Carolina. And her story, I think you'll find very interesting, even if totally unthinkable. But the unthinkable has been going on. She can tell you about it from a first-hand area of expertise in a lot of ways. So welcome Brice Taylor with us here this afternoon.
Thank you, Dean. Is this on?
Are you wired?
No.
Oh. Did you want to use that one or this one?
It doesn't matter.
You got to get close to it. Yeah, get close to the live mic. Real close.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Dean. I really appreciate the opportunity for being here today. And for me, today is quite a celebration in my recovery in ways that you'll be able to understand when I get a little bit further into my talk. But today is the day that I'm going to overcome my fear of naming the names of my affluent and oftentimes publicly known famous people that were part of my abuse system. The reason I'm doing that is in order to stand and speak for other survivors who have not yet had the chance of recovering to the level that I've been so fortunate to be supported to recover to. And so today when I speak the names, I'm speaking the names for all of us, for all of this, so that we can begin to have this system exposed and stopped, so that these crimes that are occurring against children all over the world can come to an end. I would like to also thank Ted Gunderson, who has been my personal support and security system for a lot of years. In 1985, when I first had my accident and started waking up to the reality of what I had been involved with, Ted started coming forward and advising me with ways to stay safe and to stay alive, and his technique worked, so thank you. And I'd also like to thank my children who are still under mind control and are still as yet under control with their perpetrators. I would like to thank them for being born into my life so that I would have a reason to continue living against all odds and against the horror that I woke up to, that I didn't believe that I would be able to live through. And if it wasn't for my children, I probably would not have had the motivation or the courage to continue the battle that I had to face. It's really frustrating for me as I stand before you to try to figure out how I could say something that is so important and is so important for so many people's lives, for me to be able to get it all organized and to say it in a way that you could understand. It has been a real challenge for me, and so I hope that you'll just be patient and open your minds and your hearts to the possibility that there are children all over the world who have been abused in the similar ways that I'm going to share with you my experience today, so that we can begin as a nation to put an end to what has been covered up for so many, many years. As Ted explained about the ritual abuse, I also am an intergenerational satanic ritual abuse and government mind control survivor. And satanic ritual was a way that my controllers were able to control me as using the satanic blood ritual as a trauma base. It's a conditioning in order to bring about the mind control, the levels of mind control and a multiple personality disorder that was the result of being tortured for so many different years and since I was a very small child. In order to stay alive, once I started remembering, I wrote a book, and my book is back on the table, but I'd like to explain that it was novelized not in an effort to cover up the story further, but it was novelized in an attempt to keep me alive. At that time, it was very dangerous, and I found myself often running from state to state and from people to people, trying to find a safe place to recover and to figure out what had happened. And I guess the easiest way to begin my story is to begin when I began waking up. In 1985, I had a head-on collision where my head smashed through the windshield of the car, and for the first time in my life, I had access to both sides of my brain. And there really wasn't anyone in 1985 that really understood much about ritual abuse or the memories that I started having. And so I entered school to work on my master's degree in clinical psychology, thinking that I might be able to understand what was going on with my own mind. But when my memories and flashbacks became so intrusive that I could no longer think without being constantly bombarded by visual and sensory images, much like the Vietnam veterans, I quit school and went into therapy full-time. I was in therapy every day for about 6 years on a daily basis, where I started documenting the horror of the rituals that I attended as a child, was taken to, and of all the child abuse that led to my further sophisticated programming, and then on into the government mind control, where I was used in the intelligence community with the elite families and with people such as my owner, who was Bob Hope. I did it. And thank you. And Henry Kissinger, who was responsible for programming me with what he called government mind files, where I was used as a human computer, and he took me with him to different places to do foreign policy and meetings, where he would access my mind behind the scenes in order to work with the people that he was working with the Rockefellers and some of the other people that I was involved with in bringing in the New World Order. The agenda that Henry Kissinger was the mastermind of is very, very sophisticated and involves a lot of people. It involves presidents, it involves governors, it involves foreign leaders. And in my experience, and because Henry decided that for whatever reason I was the one selected to be used as this human tape recorder that he sent around the world in order to target certain individuals that they wanted to own or control or use and manipulate through sexual encounter, and then by either passing messages to these people or retrieving messages. He also used me to send messages back and forth between George Bush and a lot of other different world leaders who were very instrumental and still are in bringing out the New World Order. Back to my therapy and all of that, as I began coming up with these memories and talking about it in my therapy with my therapist, and they just kept looking at me like I was crazy because they didn't understand what all this ritual abuse was and why I was talking about being flown at night in helicopters where there were no lights on, and where I was flown into tops of buildings in Beverly Hills and in Las Vegas and in Hollywood and all over, and they didn't understand. But my one therapist finally realized that there was something to what I was saying when she looked out the window and there were men in suits in the car waiting at my therapy session. She lived in a residential neighborhood, so it was a little out of order for that to be happening. So I realized then, and she did too, that I was in danger. And given all the names that I was remembering, she said, "I think we need to get you out of town and into hiding for a while." So I left my my home, my husband, my children, and everything that I had ever known, and went to an island where she found me a safe place to live. That's a whole other story in itself, but while I was on the island, I realized, because I wasn't around the people that I was programmed to in my family, I realized that I had been used as a sex slave with Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon and all of these different presidents, and I didn't understand. I thought, as my programming dictated, I thought that I was absolutely crazy. There's no way this happened. You know, I'm just this housewife, and this is absolutely crazy. So as my programming dictated, I had migraine headaches when I began to remember. I had suicidal feelings. I wanted to cut and burn myself. I had to fight a lot of the programming that was there and very carefully set into place that guaranteed national security that I would never be able to remember and tell. But through what I call is my divine intervention and my spiritual connection, I was led all over the place to people and places that would help me so that I would recover in order to stand before you and to report what it was that I saw and what I heard and what I know. And what I do know is that children are being used as huge financial resources and tortured and abused in horrendous ways in order to fund a lot of the covert operations that I believe and know now are the mind control operations and a lot of the other government products and projects that have been kept still in classified documentation. The children that were abused in many ways, like I was, and I feel like Joan Benet Ramsey was one such little child who may have had a very similar history, were, if I would explain to you that from the time I was born, that my father and others tortured me over and over with sexual abuse, satanic ritual abuse, near drowning and suffocations, terror harassments where I was absolutely terrified about things that I was told when I was in a drug state were going to happen to myself and my family. Electroshock in the earlier years when I was a child, they used cattle prods, and as I grew older, they used stun guns on me. Food and sleep deprivation, and then as I grew older, and evidently I was able to, for whatever reason, master the levels of abuse that I had gone through and was able to do what they wanted to. I was taken to military bases, I was taken to Disneyland, and I was taken to NASA, and I was put into a lot of the equipment that they use on astronauts and that they have there that's very sophisticated brainwave mind control programming technology that is in use, that also uses drugs, bright light, sound, and electrodes, and all kinds of very, very sophisticated frequency medicine. I was taken to Edwards Air Force Base. I was taken to Point Mugu Naval Weapons Center, 29 Palms in California, and a lot of different military installations around the country. Henry Kissinger took me into different agencies in D.C. and asked me to use my photographic memory, which he had programmed in, to document documents that he wanted to have in my mind so that if he ever needed to pull up information, he could do that. And I was also used as an information gather between a lot of the members of this elite, the global elitists that feel that, and I listened in between Kissinger and Rockefeller as they talked about the fact that 98% of the world population really doesn't think and doesn't deserve to be alive, and that they aren't genetically elite like they are and their progeny, and they really wanted to reduce the population of the planet so that it would be left in a more pristine way for their progeny. Adolf Hitler and George Bush both talked about the New World Order. And from what I now understand, the concentration camps in Nazi Germany were actually used for mind control experimentation. And Mark Phillips, who was a person that I knew several years ago, actually shared with me, and it's documented in Linda Hunt's book, Project Paperclip, that Mark Phillips actually was instrumental and was a witness in flying these Nazi doctors to our country and installing them into the major universities. They were given political immunity as they continued to do the experimentation on the mind. And a lot of survivors that I talk with from all over the world and that write me letters are naming all of these different people and are naming the different places that they were taken into hospitals, universities, military bases in order to further their programming. The other thing I would like that I think is really, really important to explain is that people that have been satanically, ritualistically abused are controlled and are actually, the plan of control was to manipulate people through, not only through the trauma which causes the multiple personality and dissociation, but also the guilt. And I don't know that I could really explain to you, but I think that those of you that are parents might understand the absolute terror and horror of waking up, as I did, to realize that not only had my parents done this horrific abuse to me, but that I had also passed this down to my children in a programmed state that I was totally and completely unaware of. And I think that anyone that ever says that they've been programmed or ritually abused and says that they did not abuse their own children or pass this down are really not truly survivors of this abuse, because that is the way that they keep people totally and completely under control. My children are now, my oldest son is 21 and my daughter is 19. And my youngest son is 15, and as I said, they're still totally under control. My daughter also was used and was programmed from birth, actually. She was taken out of my arms in the hospital, and an intelligence officer stuffed a wadded tissue down her throat and brought her near death immediately after her birth in order to dissociate her and to dissociate me and terrify me to not tell. Kelly is now in basically a group home, and she is totally and completely a mess. And I believe that there are children all over the world who are suffering from this and are stuffed away in mental hospitals or prisons or whatever and not believed. And so in this way, the plan continues to proliferate, and these children end up not getting the help that they deserve because of the media cover-up, because this is all such a large political agenda with such, as you can see, it's got wide backing. It's got a lot of years of loyalty to it, and a lot of people and a lot of technology. But I believe that they were short-sighted as far as not understanding that even their technology that was guaranteed that I could never remember by national security agenda was that they were very short-sighted in their own spirituality, to know that my innate spirituality would be what would lead me out of this and into the truth of what happened. And so that's where I believe that as we're all able to connect more spiritually, to be discerning, and to not just take what people say or what you read in the newspaper, giving you the propaganda lies that they want you to believe, but there is a way out of it, and that's by learning to critically analyze, think on our own, and trust ourselves to know that we know the truth. I think it's really important, and I'd like to thank Barbara Marciniak and Sylvia Gillot for being there for people like myself who are able to really support people in the truth of what happened and to continue to get this information out and to have an open mind about what's happened so that we can begin to bring an end to this.